So welcome to this Tuesday afternoon study. We'll be looking at the questions of Sakka, which is number 21 in the long discourses of the Buddha. One of the books has got a marker for that sutta there. You see it? Can you call out the page number so that others will know? Okay. The reason that I selected this sutta is one section of it, which is a very excellent straight ahead Dhamma teaching in terms of questions and answers, which is pertinent to the theme that I've taken up for this week, which is about equanimity and compassion. But the section, which is sort of like pure Dhamma, is in the middle of a great frame of a story, which is very wild and very mythological. I was recently listening to Bhikkhu Sujata's series of talks that he gave about mythology and the suttas. And he mentioned that you do see those elements in the suttas. It doesn't mean that it's not true or that it's bad or that it's negative. It's just a different way of teaching. The Buddha took the elements of the culture in terms of mythology, and then he used those elements in order to convey what he wanted to teach about the Dhamma, about our path. But oftentimes, you sometimes come across things in these stories that are very like upside down and opposite of what we expect. And that's a part of the characteristic of mythologies, like turning conventional things upside down. And another aspect of mythology is saying things that are like true about human nature and what is, which might be opposite to what should be. So if you see something in mythology and it says, I can't believe the Buddha is recommending this, well, he's not recommending it. He's using something which is present in the mythology of that culture as a starting point for the teaching. So with that preamble, I'm going to open the sutta. So I've heard at one time the Buddha was staying in the land of the Magadhans, where east of Rajagaha, there is a Brahmin village named Abasanda, north of which, on Mount Vaidyaka, is Indra's Hill Cave. I think this is a place that you can still go to visit. At the time of Sakka, the Lord of the Gods grew eager to see the Buddha. He thought, where is the Blessed One at present, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha? Seeing that the Buddha was still at Indra's cave, he addressed the gods of the 33. Good sirs, the Buddha is staying in the land of the Magadhas in Indra's Hill Cave. What if we were to go and see that Blessed One, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha? Now, Sakka is a younger version of Indra as the chief of the gods. And he, in the past, was violent and conducted wars. But then, after he encountered the Dhamma, he became a stream winner. That's something that happens in this sutta. And he became peaceful. He became wise. He became a proponent of the Dhamma. So Sakka addressed this centaur named Panchasika. Centaur in the Pali, it's a Gandhaba, and this is a type of a demigod who is associated with sensual pleasure and associated with lust and also associated with procreation. Dear Panchasika, the Buddha is staying in the land of the Magadhas in Hill. What if we go see the Blessed One? Yes, Lord, replied the centaur. Then, taking his arched harp made from pale timber of wood apple, he went as Sakka's attendant. Now I'm going to pause for a second and play you a little music on the harp, on the vina, so you'll know what it sounds like, and you'll see how it's kind of like different than what we're used to. Now, if I do share, if I do advanced sharing options, no, can you hear that sound? Not coming through. Do you know how to make the sound come through? Uh, Stop. I'm going to look at my references. Well, I may have forgotten how to do this. So if that's the case, then so this is what the sound of that sounds like. Uh, so continuing the sutta. So he takes his harp, his vina, made from pale timber of wood apple, and he went as Sakka's attendant. He went with a retinue consisting of the gods of the 33, the centaur Panchasika. He vanished from the heaven of the gods and landed on Mount Vedayika, north of Ambasanda. Now at that time, a dazzling light appeared over Mount Vedayika and Amasanda, as happens through the glory of the gods. People in the villages round about, terrified, shocked, and awestruck, said, Mount Vedayika must be on fire today, blazing and burning. Why has such a dazzling light appeared over Mount Vedayika? Then Sakka addressed the centaur, Panchasika. He said, My dear, it is hard for one like me to get near the realized ones while they are on retreat, practicing absorption, enjoying absorption. But if you were to charm the Buddha first, then I could go to see him. Yes, Lord, replied the centaur. And he went near and stood to one side, thinking this is neither too far, nor too near. He'll hear my voice. And now this is while the Buddha is meditating. Centaur plays his harp and he sings. He's addressing it to Bada Suryavachasa, who is the lady that he's in love with. He sings, O Bada Suryavachasa, my darling sunshine, I pay homage to your father Timbaru, through whom was born a lady so fine to fill me with joy I never knew. As sweet a breeze to one who's sweating, or when thirsty, a sweet and cooling drink, so dear are you, Angirasi, to me. Just like the teaching is to the saints, just like the Dhamma is to the Arahats. So if you want to get a date with somebody, you could compare them to how the Dhamma is to the Arahats. Like a cure when you're struck by fever dire, or food to ease the hunger pain. Come on, Bada, please put out my fire. Quench me like water on a flame. A joking pun on Nibbana being coming quenched. As elephants burning in the heat of summer sink down in a lotus pond to rest, so cool, full of petals and of pollen, that's how I would plunge into your breast. Like elephants bursting bonds in rutting season, beating off pricks of lance and pikes. I just don't understand what is the reason I'm so crazy for your shapely thighs. For you, my heart is full of passion. I'm in a besotted state of mind. There's no going back. I'm just not able. I'm like a fish that's hooked on the line. Come on, Bada. Hold me, fair of thighs. Embrace me, maid of captivating eyes. Take me in your arms, my lovely lady. That's all I'd ever want or could desire. Ah, then my desire was such a small thing, my sweet, with your curling wavy hair. Now, like to Arahant's offering, it's grown some very much from there. Like to Arahant's an offering, it's grown, my desire has grown so much. Like to Arahant's an offering has grown so much from there. Whatever merit I have forged to give to such perfected beings, may that my altogether gorgeous ripen in togetherness with you. Whatever merit I have forged in this vast territory, may that my altogether gorgeous ripen in togetherness with you. And the Sakyans, absorbed, did meditate at one, alert and mindful too. O sage, seeking the state free of death, so I, O my sunshine, seek for you. And just like the sage would delight once he had awakened to the truth, so I would delight, my fine lady, if I were to become one with you. If Sakka were to grant me one wish as Lord of the 33, my Bada, you're all I would wish for, so strong is the love in me. Like a freshly blossoming sal tree is your father, my lady, so wise. I pay homage to he, bowing humbly, whose daughter is of such a kind. When he'd spoken, the Buddha said to him, Panchasika, the sound of your strings blends well with the sound of your singing, so that neither overpowers the other. But when did you compose these verses on the Buddha, the teaching, the Sangha, the perfected ones, and sensual love? And the answer is, this one time, sir, when you were first awakened, you were staying on the Uruvela at the goatherd's banyan tree on the bank of Naranjara's river. At that time, I was in love with a lady named Bada, Suryavachana, darling sunshine, the daughter of the centaur king Timburu. But the sister desired another. It was the one named Sikkandi, son of Matali, the charioteer, whom she loved. Since I couldn't win that sister by any means, I took my arched harp to Timburu's home, where I played these verses. Who can explain it? Um, it might be a bit of a tongue-in-cheek satire, and it might be a satire on other religious traditions of the ancient times, which did consider the ecstasy of sexual love to have some kind of a potentially a mystical aspect, that it could become a kind of a sacrament. We see this in the Gnostic Gospels of Christianity, which are not the standard Gospels, and we see it in the mystical Islamic tradition of Sufi, and we see it in Tantra. So there must have been something in, like, maybe even as old as like prehistoric times, where the uh, uh, union of a man and woman in sex was given a spiritual aspect. It seems strange to us because the Buddhists have given up or the sensual desire, and the Buddhist monks have taken on the celibate lifestyle as being the better lifestyle, and so we don't usually see such things in the suttas. I'll ask other smart people if they can explain this any further, or if there's a question. Okay. Um, Part of the setting about this, there's one part of the sutta which is about um, sensuality, and then there's a second part of the sutta which is about war and conflict, and then comes the Dhamma, which is like the synthesis that shows the way to transcend sensual desire and also to transcend anger, violence, and war. So in that way, I didn't want to skip this part because that's like the two parts. There's this extreme and that extreme, and then the middle way. So there's sensual desire, hatred, and war, and then the middle way, which transcends them both. It says, when I share, there's a button on the sides that says optimize sound. Oh, well, okay, too late for that. I'm going to continue reading. Sakka thought. Panchasika is exchanging pleasantries with the Buddha. He addressed Panchasika, "My dear, please bow to the Buddha for me," saying, "Sir, Sakka, Lord of Gods, with his ministers and retinue, bows with his head at your feet." "Yes, Lord." He bowed to the Buddha and said that. Uh, Panchasika, his ministers, his retinue. The Buddha said, "May they be happy, for all want to be happy, whether gods, humans, titans, dragons, centaurs, or any other diverse creatures there may be. For that is how the realist ones salute such illustrious spirits." Being saluted by the Buddha, Sakka entered Indra's hill cave, bowed to the Buddha, stood to one side, and the gods of the 33 did likewise, as did Panchasika. And at that time the uneven places were evened out, the cramped places were opened up, the darkness vanished in the cave, and light appeared, as happens through the glory of the gods. The Buddha said to Sakka, "It's incredible and amazing that you, Venerable Kosya, who has so many duties to do, should come here." So Kosya is another name of Sakka. And he answers, "For a long time I've wanted to come, but I wasn't able to, being prevented by my many duties and responsibilities for the gods of the 33. And now here's another anecdote. This one time, sir, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in the frankincense tree hut. Then I went to Savatthi to see the Buddha. But at that time, the Buddha was sitting immersed in some kind of meditation. And a divine maiden of great King Vesavana named Bhutaji was attending on the Buddha, standing there paying homage with joined palms. So I said to her, 'Sister, please bow to the Buddha for me,' saying, 'Sir, Sakka, Lord of the Gods, with ministers and retinue, bows with his head at your feet.' When I said this, she said to me, 'It's the wrong time to see the Buddha. He's in retreat.' Well then, sister, please convey my message when the Buddha emerges from that immersion." I hope that the sister bowed to you. Do you remember what she said?" "She did bow, Lord of Gods, and I remember what she said. I also remember," this is the Buddha, "that it was the sound of your chariot wheels that pulled me out of that immersion." "Sir, I have learned and heard this in the presence of God who were reborn." So this previous time, Sakka disturbed the Buddha during meditation. Now, if the Buddha was deeply in samadhi, he would not be disturbed by any kind of noise. So this kind of a statement means that he emerged for the sake of giving an instruction to be quiet and polite when approaching the teacher. Or it could mean that he was just getting in or coming out of the meditation at that time. Now comes another story. This is another character of mythology. Instead of being sort of like a story with the beginning, the middle, and the end, it wanders from theme to theme. Oh, I see, Richard. I'll see what you have to add at this moment.
Thank you. I find it curious that the translation uses centaurs, because that in Greek mythology is half man, half animal. But I know that when he translates, he tries to modernize it to a certain extent, to maybe bring in elements that might be more familiar to people or something. And the other thing, the vina, I don't know if he called it harp. This translation by Maurice Walsh, I believe, calls it a harp. The Vina is more like a bass guitar. If you're, you don't see it very often, but it's a much larger guitar. I think in Mexican music, the mariachi band, you'll see them. They play a big bass guitar. So as opposed to the sitar, which is a higher sounding instrument, the
Huh?
Vina is a very deep sounding instrument. Almost like a
Okay.
bass fiddle to a certain extent. But the other question I have is, if you could go back in your thing just a little bit, which you just read. Yeah. About coming out of the meditation.
Yes.
In the Vinaya, there's uh, Mahamoggallana says that he was in the imperturbable meditation, and yet he could still hear elephants and horses and things like that. And another bhikkhu accused him of telling a lie, that he couldn't have possibly been in the imperturbable meditation if he could still hear the horses and the elephants and things. But Buddha says no. Moggallana spoke truthfully, because imperturbable meditation is not necessarily where you're so abstracted from the world that you don't hear anything with the senses. It's just that nothing that hits your senses moves you. It doesn't cause you to react in any way. So Buddha may have been in that type of level of meditation, because he says he heard Indra's chariot wheels, right, coming up, and then he could think. It's not moving him in the sense that it makes him happy or makes him unhappy or whatever, but he could have thought at that point in time, oh, I should come out of my meditation, see who this is that's approaching,
Yep.
and deal with them accordingly. Anyways, that's just my view, but
Yeah.
But thank you.
One of the regulations that we have is that when going into meditation, we would make a determination beforehand about how long to stay in meditation. And we would make a determination that if there's a community meeting, we would come out of meditation. So it's certainly possible to have set up the meditation in a way that one's able to come out of it. I'm seeing that Leo has come, and I'd offer you a book. Would you like one? Okay. So I'll carry on reading. This is another story about sensuality and about goodness and about upside downness. The upside downness is where the woman is more accomplished in practice than even a bhikkhu. Do you have the page number for that? The story of Gopika?
Page 325.
325, okay. Right here in Kapilavatthu, there was a Sakyan lady named Gopika who had confidence in the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha, and had fulfilled her ethics. This is a shorthand for somebody who is a stream winner. Being accomplished in the ethics together with the confidence in the Triple Gem is one shorthand that's sometimes used to describe the stream winner. Losing her attachment to femininity, she developed masculinity. When her body broke up, after death she was reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. In the company of gods of the 33, she became one of my sons. This is one of the sons of Sakka. There they knew him as the god Gopaka. Meanwhile, 3 other bhikkhus who had led the spiritual life under the Buddha were born in the inferior centaur realm, the Gandhabba realm. There they amused themselves, supplied and provided with 5 kinds of sensual stimulation, and became my servants and attendants. At that, Gopaka scolded them. Where on earth were you at, good sirs, when you heard the Buddha's teaching? For while I was still a woman, I had confidence in the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha, and had fulfilled my ethics. I lost my attachment to femininity and developed masculinity. When my body broke up after death, I was reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm, in the company of the gods of the 33. I became one of Sakka's sons. Here they knew me as the god Gopaka. But you, having led the spiritual life under the Buddha, were reborn in the inferior centaur realm. It's a sad sight to see fellow practitioners reborn in the inferior centaur realm. When scolded by Gopaka, 2 of those gods regained their memory right away. That would be they regained their sati, their mindfulness. They went to the host of the priest of divinity, which is a different heavenly realm, but one god remained attached to sensual pleasures. I was a laywoman, disciple of the clear-eyed one, and my name was Gopika. I was devoted to the Buddha and the teachings and faithfully served the Sakka. Because of the essence of Buddha's teaching, I'm now a mighty splendid son of Sakka, reborn among 3 and 33. Here they know me as Gopaka. And this is repeating in verse what we just read in prose. Scolded by the disciple of Gautama, comprehending Gopaka, those 2 bhikkhus were struck with urgency. Let's strive. Let's try hard. We won't serve others anymore. 2 of them roused up energy, recalling the Buddha's instructions. Right away, they became dispassionate, seeing the drawbacks in sensual pleasures, the fetters and bonds of sensual pleasures, the ties of the wicked one, so hard to break. They burst them like a bull elephant his ropes and passed right over the 33. The gods with Indra and the progenitor were all gathered in the hall of justice. As they sat there, they passed over them, the heroes, desireless, practicing purity. Seeing them, Vasava was struck with urgency. The master of the gods in the midst of the group said, "These were born in the lesser centaur realm, but now they pass us by." Heeding the speech of one so moved, Gopaka addressed Vasava. There is a Buddha, a lord of men in the world, known as the Sakyan sage. He's mastered the senses. These sons of his lost their memory, but when scolded by me, they gained it back. Of the 3, there is one who remains dwelling in the host of centaurs, but 2, recollecting the path to awakening, serene, spurn even the gods. Such is the explanation of the teaching here. Not a single disciple doubts that. We venerate the Buddha, the victor, Lord of men, who has crossed the flood and cut off doubt. They attain distinction to the extent they understand the teachings here. 2 of them distinguished in the host of priests of divinity. They come here, sir, to realize the same teaching. If the Buddha would give me a chance, I would ask a question, dear sir. Pause again here. Now, in our modern times, we think that it's a sign of cultural hierarchy that ain't necessarily so, that the woman is longing to be a man. But it's also true that there are many, many stories, and Jataka stories and mythology and some of the anecdotes that are given that are to the effect that it's not by your caste or status that you were born with that determines whether you are a Brahmin or whether you are to be honored, what you accomplished, that it's by your deeds that you would be regarded and respected as a Brahmin. So one's inherited qualities are not determining. And as well, it's also strikes me as a bit of a gentle, tongue-in-cheek warning to the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis that just getting in robes doesn't mean that we've got it made. And we have to also practice or else we could be like those careless bhikkhus and be reborn in a sensual lover. If I haven't called an Aya Brahmavara yet. Okay, do you have anything to say?
Thanks, Aya. This is really, it's all very interesting. It's so different, from the Majjhima Suttas generally, and it does strike me as quite a lot of additional material has crept in, perhaps, over time. But it is very interesting just to take in, this kind of cosmology and these creatures and beings and what's being conveyed. And yeah, it's a very different flavor, here to the maybe more core material of the
Right.
Buddha's teachings.
Yeah. We're going to come to some core material in just a couple of seconds as soon as we hear from Richard.
Thank you, Raya. I think it's curious that she goes to become a son of the gods of the 33, but when she teaches the bhikkhus that only achieve the first level of heaven, 2 of them go all the way up to the Brahma realm.
Yeah. Right.
That's one thing. And another thing is that this may be controversial, but I've come to the conclusion that the word sati means attention. So what happens is they didn't pay attention when they were bhikkhus. So when they passed away, their mind just went to, because of their good mind, state of mind, you might say, they went to a heavenly realm and were just enjoying the senses and everything. So she reminds them that, no, pay attention, pay attention to what the Buddha was teaching, right? And explains it a little bit to them. And then they do that. And the reason I think it means pay attention is because, say you're in a class and the teacher says to the students, pay attention, right? I'm going to teach this thing here. And those who do have a tendency to remember what the teacher teaches them. Those who don't, and that's where the memory comes in, sati memory, right?
Yes.
So it's commonly translated as mindfulness, but I really think it means attention, and by that attention you will remember. And therefore you'll have that like a tool in your mind to use, okay, when you're passing away and everything, you'll have that attention and you'll know not to get distracted and to let go, Anyways, that's just
Thank
my
you.
opinion. Thank you very much.
That would be especially true in the ancient times when people were learning in an oral tradition. You had to be able to hear something, perhaps only one time. You have a chance to hear it, and then you should be able to remember it very accurately. Even if you hear something 2 times or something, then you should have it pretty well memorized. And that's by having developed and cultivated the skill of being able to pay attention and remember. Yeah. Okay. Elizabeth says, I never expected to giggle at a sutta lesson. I noticed that the woman in the song has the name Bada, which almost rhymes with Buddha. So, right, that's another part of the punning quality or the humorous quality of these suttas, is that some of the names that they give to these characters are almost similar to some of the epithets that are used to describe the Buddha or that are used to describe the enlightened ones. So that's true. I'm going to go on and read now. We're going to come to the core part, and I want you to think here, how can these teachings, the Buddha is going to teach how we get in trouble and how we get out of trouble. So a very important lesson coming up. Having been granted an opportunity by the Buddha Sakka asked the first question. Dear sir, what fetters bind gods, humans, titans, dragons, centaurs, and any of the other diverse creatures, so that though they wish to be free of enmity, violence, hostility, and hate, they still have enmity, violence, hostility, and hate? This was Sakka's question. The Buddha answered him, Lord of gods, the fetters of jealousy and stinginess bind the gods, titans, dragons, centaurs, and any of the other creatures. So though they wish to be free from enmity, violence, hostility, and hate, they still have enmity, violence, hostility, and hate. So in this case, jealousy, these are faults that are related to ownership and property and what is mine. So if you have something that's yours and I want that thing to be mine, then I'm jealous. And if I have something which is mine and I don't want to share it with you, that's stinginess. So he's pointing to that aspect of greed, which is ownership, having the ownership of things. So this is very much involved with the creation of the delusion of the self. If a person identifies with the things that they own, even if they think they own this body, or they think they own their intelligence, or they think they own their social status, or their beauty, or anything else, then they identify with that, and that gets built up into their idea about the self. But this is at a more like a simpler level, just that I have gotten enough delicious fruit from the trees and found some delicious flesh. I found some fish in the creek or something like that, and I got a little something to eat, and tomorrow I can go get some more. And in that case, I don't need to own much because I can always just reach and get what I need. So this is sort of like an ideal version of pre-modern society before agriculture. But then when we got to be in a human culture, then people started to build up their wealth. They started to have the granary filled with grain, and then they needed to have defenses to protect their property, and the distinction between the high and the low became greater and greater. Those with wealth became able to oppress those without wealth. Persons became able to be the owners of other persons. So you have slaves and servants that you own, and all of this is described here as the starting point for enmity. I'm going to go on a little bit further before we open for a conversation. So Sakka answered, delighted. Sakka approved and agreed with what the Buddha said, saying, that's so true, Blessed One. That's so true, Holy One. Having seen the Buddha's answer, I've gone beyond doubt and got rid of indecision. During this sutta, it seems that Sakka is got the stream entry path at a minimum, and then at the end of the sutta, he makes his declaration of having the fruition of stream entry. So that's what I think what he means here by going beyond doubt. Then he asks another question. What's the source, origin, birthplace, and inception of jealousy and stinginess? When what exists, is there jealousy and stinginess? When what doesn't exist, is there no jealousy and stinginess? And then the answer is the liked and the disliked. What's liked is the word pia. Pia. Pia, that's a Pali word that means dear, darling, lovable, likable. And then apia is not lovable, not likable. So like and dislike is the source of jealousy and stinginess. You know, we were talking this morning about, and the meditation about equanimity and just looking within and seeing what's the state of the heart. Is the heart calm or is the heart disturbed? Is the heart clenched and in some kind of disturbance? And one of the ways the heart can be clenched in a disturbance is we say, I don't like it. I dislike that. Something in the situation, I hate it. I dislike it. And then the liking, if it's coupled with craving and preferences and says, oh, I like this one, I don't like that one, then the whole world is divided into the black and white. And then we got this dualism, and that creates jealousy and stinginess. And what's the source of like and dislike? It says desire. This is called chanda. Chanda has also an idea of a will or a wish. When I lived at the Bhavana Society, the kuti that I stayed in was called the Chanda House because the family that had donated that building to the Bhavana Society, their family name was Will. And so Bhante said, Will is Chanda. So it was called Chanda House. So you can have a good Chanda, which is like you can have the Chanda for making progress on the path and for obtaining liberation. And then you also can have unwholesome kind of Chanda. Kama Chanda is like a sensual will, a sensual wish. I associate this with the moment when a sort of a generalized liking and disliking, which may be sort of like in the background, but then something crystallizes in the mind with a perception or a volition, and you realize, I've got to do something. I got to either go get it or I've got to get rid of it. And suddenly there's like the burst of energy and you're going to go and get rid of that thing that you don't like or go get the thing that you do like. So that's what I think is chanda. What is the source of desire? Okay. No, it says thought is the source of desire. So the thought here is vitaka. Now again, there is a wholesome kind of vitaka, which we see, for example, in practicing meditation. At the first jhana, there is the presence of vitaka vichara, which is called applied thought and sustained thought. And the vitaka is when the mind connects to the object of meditation. So, like if someone is trying to do a breath meditation, but they're so distracted by their problems and their worries and their thoughts or whatever else is distracting them, and so like disconnected from the body, that they don't even able to have a clear perception of whether or not they're breathing. Their mind is like not able to connect with the object of meditation. So part of the initial training, like for beginners in meditation, is to teach them how to clear the mind of distraction and be able to connect. But in this case, one way you could think about it is there's a V in vitaka, which is a separation. So the vitaka is the way of thinking that is separating one thing from another thing. So here, this is me, and there is you. That's two different things. These are my fingers, and then from here to here is the palm, and from here to here is the wrist, and from here to here is the arm. So if I think in a way that's making each thing separated, that's also, you could say, part of like a vitaka. So it says here that thought is the source of desire. So this is the process of the arising of that volition, that will to get what we want, get rid of what we don't want. And so when this is where like views creep in. Like this is right, this is wrong. This is what is good for me, this is what's bad for me. This is what's safe for me, this is what's dangerous for me. That's the kind of thought I think that's being pointed to here. And what is the source of thought? The source of thought is judgments driven by the proliferation of perception. So Papancha Sanya is the proliferation of perceptions. So this will be where the different aggregates of mentality and start to spin and synergize together. And you had some underlying tendency of greed and of stinginess or jealousy. And then you saw something that is not yours, but you like it. And then you form the desire to go get it. And then you start to thinking, I should have it. And then the whole proliferation, like, okay, how can I connive and plan on, or why should I have it? How should I have it? When should I have it? If I do this, so when I'm going to be able to get it, and so on and so on. So then the whole mind is then off to the races, spinning with thinking and planning and imagining different kinds of alternative futures or alternative situations where I will be able to satisfy my desire and get what I like or get rid of what I don't like. All coming from this idea of what is mine. Okay, I'm going to pause here. And I see, Richard, you have something to add.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to point out in this particular section you're looking at, the Papancha, whatever the Pali was, there's Sakka, right? Those are Sankharas. It's a Papancha of these ideas, these concepts coming up in your mind and formulating a whole thing. And yes, that's what I want. I want this thing. You know, it's not just an awareness of something. It's that whole structure, that whole construction going on in your mind. And this is connected with Paticca Samuppada. You know, it's from volition under the influence of avijja, which I like to call incomplete knowledge. And this sankhara arises, this formulation of thought, you know, concept, whatever, you know, completely together, a bunch of things together. And then you become cognizant of that, and that. Now, Buddha, when he gave this, he's talking about, how did I get here? How did I take birth? Why am I here, a human being, a man in this world, right? So that's, this particular example is specifically with that, and that's why it's nama rupa. Nama, a name, a symbolic representation of form. So that's the Sankara, is an idea. I want to be a man. I want to be a woman. I want, you know what I mean? So then I can enjoy the senses and everything in a certain way, you know, based on that formulation in your mind, based on that conception. Anyways, that's my opinion. Thank you for listening.
Yes. Okay. I think I may again call on Aya Brahmavara to give us a different way of understanding this sequence.
Thank you very much, Aya. It's a really interesting sequence. And yeah, I can see, as Richard says, how we can connect it with dependent arising, those teachings. And yet it has a particularity to it. And just for me, reflecting on how it's really pointing to, yeah, how our conditioning leads to us thinking in certain ways, and it's through thinking that we develop so many difficulties, have so many problems. So if we weren't cogitating about things, we wouldn't be so vulnerable to following our desires and all the difficulty and strife and trouble that comes from that. But it's just very interesting, this particular use of language, and I feel there's a lot here we can contemplate usefully.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm appreciating this teaching.
Yeah. In part, I feel, putting it in the context of Sakka's story, that he was a fighter and he became a king of peace. That this teaching is very much directed to him. And part of what I see here is that if you saw this particular sequence of causation, you would develop your hiriotapa, or your disillusionment, or your readiness to give up this whole process, even though you might not yet know how. But when you find yourself in the middle of some string of papancha, or you find yourself in the middle of some desire, or you find yourself in the middle of this like strong sensation, like, oh, I don't like that. That when that happens, the light should come on and say, oh, danger, danger. Here goes this line of causation, which is not going the way I want it to go. So we got to like make the determination to put a stop to this train, or get off this train, saying, no more. I don't choose to go around and around with this anymore, even though you might not yet know how to get out of it. But you need to like recognize the danger, even though like one part of it might seem to be delicious and delightful. Sometimes it's, I don't think, maybe those in the room don't do this so much, but some people could like get together and talk about the things that they hate. And they could be doing that for fun, like as a kind of like an amusement or an entertainment, to talk about things that they hate. So how dangerous is that? And but it's also dangerous to get like too much caught up with hating the things you hate, even though you know it's unpleasant. But not only is it unpleasant, but it's training the mind in the habit that's self-destructive, harmful to you, harmful to others, harmful to both. I'm going to go on now and read the next section. This is the Buddha tells us how to get out of it. Okay, Richard, briefly.
Thank you, Ed. Oh, another thing I wanted to point out is it starts out with these really bad things like hate, harming, hostility, jealousy. So it's going from a very gross emotions, and those are the things that bar you from going high into the heavens. So the least of those you have, the more higher into the heavens, because who is Indra? The king of heaven. And it's interesting that he's the interlocutor here, because people want to shoot for the heavens, right? And beyond Indra, then you get to the Brahma realms, which are you might think of as the more spiritual, you might say, type of realm, right? But it's interesting that he's kind of following a path like, okay, well, how am I going to reduce these things,
Yeah.
Which will qualify people to go, higher and higher into the heavens, so to speak. Anyways, just something I noticed. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so let's continue. Now, here's the answer about how to get out of it. The Buddha continues teaching, Lord of Gods, there are two kinds of happiness, I say, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. There are two kinds of sadness, that which you should cultivate, that which you should not. There are two kinds of equanimity, I say, that which you should cultivate, that's what you should not cultivate. So happiness here is somanasa. Sometimes you see sukha and somanasa together, and in which case, in that expression, the sukha means bodily happiness, and somanasa means psychological happiness. And then the sadness is called domanasa. And sometimes you say dukkha and domanasa together as an expression, in that case, dukkha is particularly the bodily pain, and the domanasa is the mental pain or the psychological pain. And then the equanimity is upekkha. This passage is so interesting to me because I learned a long, long, long time ago that Vedana is a karmic resultant. Vedana comes about because of the previous karmic conditions. And Vedana is not, you don't cultivate Vedana. Vedana is just the result that happens as a result of your cultivation. The citta or the states of mind should be cultivated. But this sutta seems to say that mental pleasant feeling, mental unpleasant feeling, mental equanimity should be cultivated. And I think it's a really interesting lesson, and it's a little different than what we hear elsewhere. But isn't it true that whether a person is in formal meditation or in ordinary life, if the mind is overtaken by some sad feeling, for example, by a depression or grief or sadness, then there's a way that somebody can choose to cultivate sadness. You could start thinking, I feel sad because life is not fair. And these things are happening and that's making me feel sad. Or I feel sad because, there's something about my body, my psychology, my genetics, my parents, my past, my history. And then you start, that's just thinking and thinking about all the things that make you feel sad. Or I feel sad because humanity is killing itself and we're all going to be destroyed by climate change and the world. And then the more we think about it, the more sad we feel, and the more, and it's like picking a scab or something like that we're not like permitting a sad feeling to have its moment and to go on and to become something else. And instead, because we choose to keep sort of like picking at it, then we're perpetuating something harmful. But then there's another kind of a unpleasant feeling that should be cultivated if there's moral shame and moral dread called hiri otapa. If you are thinking, I'm afraid to do an evil deed because that will block me from liberation. And so then that fear, it's not a happy feeling. It's got an happy feeling to it. But so then, or if you see the dukkha in the world within yourself and within people because of all of the shortcomings and what we've not accomplished yet, if you see that dukkha very clearly, knowing this is dukkha should be fully understood. Let me understand it so that I'll be able to find out what I need to let go of in order to come out of this dukkha. So in that case, you're doing cultivation connected to the feeling. If a person is sensitive to feelings, this what we were trying to talk about this morning in the meditation about the heart or the chitta, which was equanimous or which was disturbed. If you are sensitive to what's going on with the heart and with what's going on with the state of the feelings, and you recognize if one is becoming disturbed, and then as soon as that happens, immediately we should take care of it. That is doing some kind of cultivation in connection with feeling, and so the feeling is giving you the really like important information about what direction you're going in and what direction you need to go in. But I just think it's interesting to speak about cultivating of feelings. So why did I say there are two kinds of happiness? You should know of a happiness. When I cultivate this kind of happiness, unskillful qualities grow and skillful qualities decline. You should not cultivate that kind of happiness. If you know of a happiness, when I cultivate this kind of happiness, unskillful qualities decline and skillful qualities grow. You should cultivate that kind of happiness. And that which is free of placing the mind and keeping it connected, that's vitakka vichara, is better than that which still involves placing the mind and keeping it connected. So this is referring particularly to the happiness in meditation within the first jhana, the jhana accompanied by that vitakka vichara, that applied mind, applied thought, and sustained thought. It is a happiness, but it's not as great as the happiness which is freed from that. Now, students, put your hand up and tell me an example of a kind of happiness that you should cultivate and one that you should not cultivate. Okay, Elaine. You're muted.
It's okay to practice, cultivate happiness in the practice of meditation. Joy and bliss are absolutely good there. It's not okay to cultivate joy and sensual pleasures like food.
Yeah. Okay. I'll call in Chintana.
I'm going to say that it is good to cultivate metta, and it's not good to cultivate sensual pleasures.
Right. I will, how about entertainment?
I didn't put up my hand, but entertainment. That's what I found strange about this sutra, the song. And yeah, that there was a whole song there, and it's about sensual pleasure, and it's something that I mean, you might be able to hear it in a rock band somewhere. So that kind of threw me off.
Yeah. So I'm sure, I don't think the Buddha was recommending that that's the way of practice. But in the sutta, he's pointing that there is something which exists in this world. It exists in humanity, which is that people can get confused or connected between the spiritual happiness and sensual happiness. It would be like if you fall in love with your guru and say, oh, I've got a crush on my guru, or something like that. Or if you, this is an example I learned a long time ago. Someone was a social worker, says, if you would get the American flag and you hug the flag and say, I love my country, that's just confused. That is not what love of the country is. That's getting the categories mixed up. And so, um, but there is something that does exist that mixes the sensual and the mystical, gets mixed up together in religion. And the Buddha is not recommending it, but he's using the mythology to set that out. But it's not what he recommends. I'll call in Ananaya.
What comes to mind for me is mudita, joy in the happiness in the joy of others, and the well-being and goodness of others. And by the same flip side of that is not taking pleasure, schadenfreude, not taking pleasure in the misfortune and downfall of someone you consider to be, quote unquote, a bad person or some such.
Great example. That's a wonderful example. I'm going to go on to read the next three categories here. Two kinds of sadness. When I cultivate this kind of sadness, unskillful qualities grow, skillful qualities decline. Do not cultivate that kind of sadness. And the same thing, there's another kind. When I cultivate this kind, the unskillful qualities decline and the skillful qualities grow. You should cultivate that kind of sadness. And again, that which is beyond the vitaka vichara, the applied thought and sustained thought, is better than that which still involves the vitaka vichara. These are the two kinds of sadness. And then the last one here, and this is going to probably be the last one for today's class. There are two kinds of equanimity. The kind of equanimity, when I cultivate this kind of equanimity, unskillful qualities grow, skillful ones decline. Or the other kind of equanimity that causes the unskillful qualities decline and the skillful qualities to grow. That's how you practice for the cessation of the judgments driven by the proliferation of perceptions. So, doing this really excellent Vedananupasana, being mindful of the three kinds of Vedana, and practicing yoniso manasikara. So when there's some kind of a state that you're in, you're thinking, where is this leading to? Yoniso manasikara, this is mindfulness and clear awareness to look at the causation of things. To say, what is this state coming from and what is it leading to? So then a kind of sadness that does not support, I'll give one example and then I'll invite others to give examples. A kind of sadness that is unwholesome would be if you think, Oh, I had something in the past and now I don't have it anymore. I feel so sad, so grieved because I lost what I had before. Cultivating that kind of sadness is not really helping. I invite other examples from either regarding sadness or regarding equanimity. What kind to develop and what kind to not develop. Okay, Karina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Well, there's really kind of, I have an example for both. For sadness, I was thinking of the compassion, and it reminds me of the near enemy kind of. So there's compassion that cultivate it's sadness, but it cultivates you to want to relieve the suffering. And then there's sadness that just makes you more depressed and not able to do anything, makes you more frozen. And with equanimity, it's similar. It's being even and steady versus almost like being numb and not feeling.
Yeah.
Not being not being skillful.
Right. There's an example in the sutta where the Buddha dismissed a few young monks who were not behaving well, and Sariputta was there and saw what was happening, and he was equanimous about it. He just noticed it was happening. And then later the Buddha scolded and said, you were supposed to take care of those monks and bring them out of teach them so they could come out of their bad pattern and become better. You were not supposed to just sit there being equanimous. so the kind of bad equanimity is equanimity which is lazy, which doesn't, which is passive at the wrong time, and not allowing compassion to arise at the right time. Yeah. Do you have any examples? Okay, I have Damon.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Could you explain the deeper level of, let's say, any of these sadness or equanimity or happiness? Yeah, there's two kinds, and two of them are very obvious. But the sutta seems to speak to a third level, which is very transcendent. And I was wondering if you could speak to that.
So the best I can say is, since we've been talking about the Brahma Viharas and the divine abidings recently, there's a kind of loving kindness where you're thinking about particular people or kinds of people. You're thinking about dear, lovable people and neutral people and dislikable people, or you're thinking about, my parents, my family, my relatives, my co-workers, people close by, people far away, people who are doing well, people who are in trouble, thinking about all different specific kinds of people, and making those different people the object of the meditation. That could be compared to doing a meditation which has applied thought and sustained thought, in the sense that the mind is connecting to different types of people. But the more proper way in the suttas of practicing the Brahma Viharas, it's not suggesting thinking of any people. You're not thinking about beings when you practice that style of the divine abidings. You're just bringing up kindness, and the kindness is pervading in a boundless way the whole world, and it's not stopping and particularizing on any specific people, which is putting like a limitation on it. So this is getting to, it's actually a very subtle level of meditation. One way that there's a different kind of term. One of the liberations is called the signless liberation, animitta. So animitta is the sign by which you would recognize some particular object. So like the nimitta of this microphone is that it's black and shaped like this. The nimitta of a bhikkhuni is that she's wearing that colored robe. And when the mind goes to signless meditation, it's let go of the activity of identifying and separating out different kinds of objects based on their qualities. It's just like that whole activity of dividing things up and comparing them and making differences and setting boundaries, and that whole process has just been let to go to rest, go to sleep, and the mind just becomes boundless because it's signless. And so that would be one way of understanding that these states, for those who are not very practiced in meditation, those states may still be connected with different objects or different particular thoughts or different particular words. But then if we're able to let go of all those particulars and just allow that mental state or that chitta to exist, then that would be, according to this teaching, a higher level. So you can be equanimous when you have a son who's a teenager.
Yeah.
So when your teenage son irritates you, you can make yourself be equanimous about it. So you can have equanimity for your son. But that's not as powerful as having boundless equanimity, which is apart from any particulars.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I think that getting caught in sensuality or getting caught in war and hate are still tremendous dangers. And even though we're practitioners, when we're exposed to these things in the world, it can cause our hearts to feel disturbed. And the practice of equanimity is for us to be able to learn what it is for the heart to be calm, and then to find out how to get there, how to get from a disturbed heart to the equanimous heart, the equanimous chitta. And I'm suggesting in this sutta, it's particularly suggested if you want to learn how to be equanimous, you should spend some time really focusing on mindfulness of the Vedanas, mindfulness of the three feelings. I really get to understand it. You're not to be afraid of your feelings, that you don't want feelings, because it said some of them should be cultivated. But you just want to be like really clear, really sensitive, really able to notice what kind of Vedana is going on, and then which way is it leading. And that is going to be a gateway or a pathway to be able to go beyond being caught up and obsessed either by love or by hate. This comes to a conclusion of my lesson for today. And
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Aya.
Aranam Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantam Abhivademi. Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangha Sanghang Namami. Thank you, everyone, for your good practice and for your patient listening. And I see that Venerable Maharajana is here, and I apologize for not greeting you earlier. I didn't look to everyone who was here, but there you are. Hello and farewell.
Thank you.